Everyone. My name is Dalen. I'm the campus internship coordinator here at AU, and I'm also a graduate of AU where I majored in English. So I'm today going to be talking to you about professional writing and communication. So first, I just wanted to start with some general reminders of things that you should know as you're making professional and academic documents. So two things that you want to always strive for are concision and consistency. Concision meaning using as little words as possible just to make sure you're being clear and not losing the reader. So an easy example of that is just fixing phrases where you're saying, for example, we are going to be going to the store. It's much quicker to just say, we will go to the store. So even little things like that, where you're cutting out all those filler words and just being more direct, is going to help you be a better professional writer. Consistency is another one, making sure you're using the same abbreviations throughout. If you abbreviated a month at the start, make sure you're abbreviating it through the rest of the document. If you just said March 4th with just a 4, don't make sure you don't say March 4th with a TH after it later in the document. So just those little things that you want to always be consistent with throughout the document. Of course, proper grammar, punctuation, and capitalization throughout. Make sure any words that your Google Docs or Microsoft Word are underlining for grammar checking. Make sure you resolve all those. Sometimes they're not correct, but you can still just resolve the issue. But usually you want to take the advice that the grammar checker is giving you. If you're using any dashes, make sure you put a space on both sides. That helps with formatting, just makes it look a lot cleaner. And then some things to avoid in professional documents. Usually you don't want to use personal pronouns like I, you, we, us, me. Always going to be using the third person. And then contractions. So can't, won't, aren't. You want to change those to cannot, will not, are not. So just some things to make sure you're keeping in mind. And then exclamation points. Those can look a little bit unprofessional. And they're usually not necessary, so try to avoid those on most professional and academic documents. So more specifically, I wanted to also talk about resumes and cover letters because they have a little bit of different expectations and standards. So you always want to use a standard font like Times New Roman, Arial, or Calibri. I wouldn't really stray from anything other than that. Make sure all your words are black, even hyperlinks. You almost want to just remove hyperlinks because they can distract and they can mess with applicant tracking systems. And you know how they usually turn blue when you have a link on there. So just change that to all black, no underline, no hyperlink. Consistent size and spacing, making sure all your words are pretty much the same size and spacing is consistent throughout. Be mindful of your margins. Make sure it's not like a 1-inch margin on the left and a 1.5-inch margin on the right. Pay attention to other small details. So like dashes, like I said, make sure there's a space on both sides and that you're consistent with that throughout. I see a lot of students, especially where they're indicating how long they were at a job. Sometimes they'll have like a space on one side of the dash in one section of that job. And then in a new job, they forgot to put the space or they did, and it doesn't match the other one. Making sure all the dates are aligned on the right side of the page in line with each other. Making sure you're using consistent verb tense. So past tense for jobs that you have done in the past, and then present tense for jobs that you still hold. And then abbreviations, again, like with months, days, even states where you're putting like where you're from, make sure you abbreviate them consistently throughout. So if you're going to say IL for Illinois at one point, make sure you say it that way the rest of the time. Another good thing is to do a print test. So once you finish your resume, print it out and make sure it stays on one page. Sometimes recruiters will print out resumes to read them because they enjoy doing that more. So make sure it prints cleanly too, and it prints how you see it on the computer and how you want it to look. And then career services, we can of course help with any of this, any help with spacing or margins. We can help play with things to make sure it fits on one page, help proofread and fix all those small details. So that is that for resumes and cover letters. Then I wanted to talk about LinkedIn if you have an account. If you don't, we can definitely help you get one set up. But for LinkedIn, a main thing to keep in mind is that you want to only post and repost and produce professional content. This is not like your normal social media, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, anything like that. It's a lot more professional. One of the things that's really important on LinkedIn and on your profile is your professional summary, which is a little paragraph that you write about yourself to kind of introduce yourself. This is a little bit more conversational. It's not just strictly professional. So you are going to write it in the first person and say, hi, I'm Dalen. But it's still going to keep that professional tone for the most part. But it can be conversational, like you're talking to someone, a little bit like an elevator pitch. And it's going to go over skills, interests, experience, and goals of yours. So we can definitely help with that as well. And then for your captions and comments, make sure they are also professional. Make sure you use proper grammar, spelling, and punctuation, and minimal emojis. Again, this is just much more clean compared to other social media platforms that you might have. So Slack or Teams, those are systems that a lot of offices will use to communicate quickly with each other. If they just have a quick, like, hey, can you come into my office, or a quick question, instead of emailing or calling, they might have Slack or Teams installed on your computer. Some things to be aware of with those, you want to be mindful of the different channels. So some offices will have like a channel that's work only things, or a channel that's for this kind of topic and this kind of topic, or these people are included in this channel. So make sure you're putting the correct messages in the correct channel so things don't get lost or confused. Make sure you're using direct messages in group channels appropriately. So if it's just for one person, send them a DM. But if it's for the entire group or multiple people, then you can use the group channel. Gauge the level of formality after several weeks on the job. Some offices are pretty casual with Slack or Teams, and they even have like a channel that might be just a little bit more fun conversation. And then other channels that are more work related. Some might just be strictly professional on Slack or Teams all the time. So it's going to take a couple weeks to figure that out when you're starting a job. So just make sure you're paying attention and being mindful of that. And then if you have any other confidential, sensitive, or urgent information that you need to share or make a request about, keep that in an email, not in Slack. It's just more secure. It's going to be in the person's inbox that they won't forget about it or miss that notification. It's just a good thing to keep a distinction between email conversation and quick messages on Slack or Teams. And then be mindful of notifications. Those usually can come up on the bottom right of your screen, and you don't want something to come up while you're like in a meeting with someone showing them your computer. So make sure you pause notifications when necessary. I have mine paused right now because I'm doing this presentation. So just be mindful of that and keeping notifications on only when you're at your computer by yourself. Emails. So again, you want to be concise in your emails, and your subject line should be concise and relevant to the topic that you're talking about. Don't do a whole sentence or even a super long phrase. Just make sure it's concise and to the point, but still relevant and specific enough so people can find the email again. Keep email chains relevant as well. So don't start a new email chain for a similar topic. You can keep the chain going usually if it's about a topic. So even searching and finding that chain again and then replying to it a couple days later, totally fine. And it's easier for them to look back and reference things that they might have told you. Make sure you always use a greeting and a signature in your initial email to someone. And then as the conversation goes, if they maybe start not saying hello every time or sincerely, then it can be a little bit more casual and just straight to the point, but at least start with a greeting and a signature and then see kind of where it goes from there. Reply all is something you want to keep in mind with emails. Make sure you're not replying to everyone on that chain for things that are only meant for a couple people. You usually don't need to reply all unless it's very specifically for everyone on that chain. And then there's different fields in emails. So there's the to, which is who the email is meant directly for. And then there's also CC and BCC. So CC is if you just want someone to be in the loop about that email, but it's not directly for them, you can just CC them. Blind copy is where you want them to be in the loop, but you don't necessarily want the person who is receiving the email to know that they are in the loop. So you can blind copy someone as just like a heads up, but maybe you don't want it to be obvious that they're blind copied. So use those carefully and wisely, especially when you're applying to email. Sometimes it can screw up who was originally in the to field and who was originally copied. So make sure you shift that around as appropriate as you're continuing an email chain. And then avoid sending emails from a mobile device if possible. Again, this is something you can gauge how formal the email conversation is going to be. Some people don't mind if they get an email that says sent from my iPhone or sent from my Android, but at least start with sending them from your computer, and then you can kind of gauge from there. And then reactions. A lot of email platforms will now have an option to like an email or to heart it, or even to do like a laughing emoji or a celebration emoji. Some people, again, use these, and some people it's a little bit unprofessional, especially if it's like a group email. Maybe you don't want to laugh at it or heart it if it's going to a bunch of different people. So just use those wisely. Make sure you understand the culture of who you're emailing and who's on the email before you start just reacting to a bunch of emails. Presentations. So keep your text on a presentation concise. You don't usually want more than a couple sentences in a row on a presentation. So like I'm doing bullet points, maybe a sentence, but sometimes it's just a phrase that I'm using in my bullet point. And I'm usually not using multiple sentences in a row. And then be careful with images and transitions. A lot of time they can be more distracting from who's talking. So you don't want to distract from words that you're saying. So the slides are just a guide. They're not something that everyone should be focused on because of images or transitions that are distracting. If you're going to use images, make sure you use free images or you're citing images if they were from the internet. And then use alternative text when possible. So there's usually an option on Google Slides or PowerPoint where you can put in the image a description of what it is. So if someone is visually impaired, they can look at that and read what the image is actually of. And then use standard templates and colors if available. So this is a standard Aurora University PowerPoint presentation. So I got that from our system here as staff. So if you're working at a company that has a standard PowerPoint template, make sure you use it. Make sure you're using colors that align with the brand of the company if that's something that's relevant to you. Not just using a bunch of different neon colors for no reason. There are standards and there are very specific colors. So make sure you're using those if possible. And making sure that the colors that you use are accessible. So you can use different checkers online to make sure if someone was colorblind, they could read this, and just that you're not using colors that are too close where it's hard to read. Other professional or academic documents. So make your file title specific. So an example of this, instead of just naming your file resume, you could say Dalen Johnson resume and then the position that I'm applying to. That's just going to make the life of the recruiter much easier. And then share every document as a PDF usually. That's a good way to make sure everything stays the same and looks the same when you're sharing it. And then be consistent with titles, headers, and sections. So if you bolded a section, make sure any similar section is also bolded. And then you could do like subsections that are italicized or underlined and then be consistent with that throughout. So it's not half bolded, half italicized, half underlined, just so it's easier to follow. Make sure everything is aligned appropriately and consistently and spaced out appropriately and consistently. And then beware of writing and citation styles and standards. So depending on the business or the organization that you're working in or the environment, they might subscribe to a certain style. A lot of people, when they think of that, they think of citation, which is true, but there's also different standards within Chicago Manual Style, for example, where I know there's like whether they capitalize the word president or not, whether they say like March 4th with a TH or just March 4 in their date. So there's different things to be aware of. Make sure you're being consistent and you're following the style of that company and that organization and that brand. So that's all I have today. Just wanted to quickly go over some professional writing and communication things. Again, Career Services is here to help with any professional documents like resumes, cover letters, portfolios. If you have to write a statement of interest for grad school or a position, or if you want help with your professional summary on LinkedIn, we can help with any of that. And then, of course, you can use the Academic Support Center if you need help with any academic documents like papers, projects. If you have to submit writing samples to a job, they can help with all of that. So that's all I have. Let me know if you have any questions. Thanks for watching.